Well, today I would like to discuss some of my science fiction reference books, and I've had quite a few. I've also done some work online with reference, and I'll cover a lot of that as well. This will just be a very brief look and review at the books that I have that I've been doing this with. Actually, I read all of these about a year ago before I wrote my papers on Astounding by Naval Lee, and where I examined the duration of the golden age of science fiction, which are both in my community section on the science fiction page there on YouTube. But we'll start out with Franz Rottensteiner, 1975, and not a bad reference at all. This was in all the bookstores when I was 21 years old. And now this paper here is I had to cover up quite a few of his photos here of the covers of some of the science fiction magazines back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, because this is a family-friendly site. Here is his contents page. He covers most everything. He does it very briefly and has some good thoughts on a lot of stuff. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on everything that's in all of these books, or we would be here all day. So here we have an introduction, which he does pretty well. And on these pages we have a lot of stuff. And he goes through just a very brief survey of science fiction. Then we begin with his history. And pretty good section on H.G. Wells here. And he covers a lot of other stuff, but I've got to be careful with what I'm showing you guys here. And he continues on with Wells throughout this chapter. Next, he goes on to Hugo Gernsback and does a great job with Gernsback here. I like his coverage of Ralph 124, C41 Plus. He then goes on to a lot more, but I can't show you what's in this section. We go on to John W. Campbell Jr. And once again, he does a credible job there with John W. Campbell. And we have some great covers of Astounding magazine here. And pretty good work, actually. We have a discussion of Olaf Stapledon and C.S. Lewis. Again, pretty good stuff. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Of course, we have Jules Verne here. Again, pretty darn good. No complaints. And we jump to television, and he begins with Star Trek and goes through a lot. So we're going to move on to the next book. This is Franz Rottensteiner, the science fiction book. Not a great book, but not bad either. Moving on to James Gunn. Alternate Worlds, The Illustrated History of Science Fiction. This book does have a lot of photos in it, but it is physically huge. There is a lot of text in this book as well to go along with the photos, and he has great photos, great illustrations showing the history of science fiction as it progressed through the pulps, the golden age, and the covers, and how they became more intelligent and improved on the magazines. Now, I believe this was 1975 as well. We will take a look. Yes, James produced this in 1975. Are his contents, and he really does amazing work explaining how the Industrial Revolution affected science fiction and how it moved on and how science fiction moved on with it. Everything he has in here is appropriate and is G-rated. Anyone can read this book and look at the illustrations and enjoy the book. As you can see, there is a huge amount of text here. He covers Nathaniel Hawthorne. He goes through the evolution of science fiction, going clear back as far as you can go. And he tries to determine I don't know what you would call it. He tries to name science fiction. And in here, he has about 10 or 12 different authors trying to name science fiction, and they all have different definitions. It's very difficult to define, but his illustrations here are great. His analysis is very good, and this book is certainly worth your time, and I would recommend it to everyone. He has a definite left-leaning bent to all of his thoughts. But as you can see, the science fiction magazines, beginning with Astounding, really began to mature. The covers are not ridiculous anymore. Let's see, we'll go on to the next page that I thought was one of his most interesting. And here he discusses Mark Twain in science fiction. Mark Twain, 1835-1910, published his time travel novel, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, 1889. He goes on to discuss some of his other works that he considers science fiction. And, of course, I have everything by Mark Twain, who, if you're looking for wisdom, Mark Twain is a good place to start. Here is the Signet Classic book of Mark Twain's short stories. Extract from Captain Stormfield's Visit to Heaven, and this is science fiction. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And if you're just looking for a lot of things to think about, I would recommend the complete essays of Mark Twain as well. And we'll get back to science fiction. There's a few in here. So we have covered Mark Twain here. And he does cover John W. Campbell Jr. in here with some more, really quite a bit of text, and a lot of the different covers on the different magazines. And as you can see, there is quite a bit of text in here. Here he's discussing Black Destroyer, kicking off the golden age of science fiction. We have photographs of Asimov, A.E. Van Vogt, Robert Heinlein, and Theodore Sturgeon here. This is L. Ron Hubbard, which I've barely read any L. Ron Hubbard. There's a great photograph of Randall Garrett, Sam Moskowitz, Isaac Asimov. I don't know who Donald Benson is, and John W. Campbell Jr. We have Ross Rocklin, Eric Frank Russell, L. Sprague de Camp, and Henry Kuttner here. Fritz Leiber, Clifford Simak, which is how I've always heard it pronounced, Lester Del Rey, and Alfred Bester. This is great stuff. James Gunn was there for all of this. So his knowledge is firsthand. Ray Bradbury, more astounding science fiction. A whole lot more authors here. A. Bertram Chandler, Paul Anderson, Charles Harness, James Schmidt, one of the most underrated writers of all time. E. Main Hall never gets the credit for her work with A.E. Van Vogt. Here's another photo of A.E. Van Vogt over here. Just a tremendous amount of stuff. He goes through the big boom of science fiction, 1940, 1955. A lot to read in this book. This is about a 260-page book, but it's literally a 500-page book if it was a normal-sized book. So this book contains a lot. Now we're moving into fandom later on. And he does have a great authors section where he really does a great job with more photographs of the authors and biographies of the authors. And this has been a great resource for me. James Gunn did a great job with this, and I was really impressed by this book. He jumps on here to more authors. Keith Laumer, Joanne Russ, Kate Wilhelm, Lloyd Biggle Jr. Yeah, I would not have known what these people looked like because I attended local conventions here near where I live. And mostly I just talked to a bunch of other guys about my age, about science fiction, from 1971 through about 1986 when the conventions just kind of dried up. I did get to meet Gene Roddenberry, and he was at one of the local colleges, one of the universities, and he went on to tour with a copy of the first pilot episode of Star Trek, and I got to meet him there and discuss that with him a little bit. Next is one of my favorite references, Billion Year Spree by Brian W. Aldiss. This book is great. Now, I disagree with Mr. Aldiss on a few things, but he has very in-depth analysis. And I believe this one was published in 1973. Yep, 1973. And he talks about Mary Shelley here. This book you really kind of need to read this one. It's hard to summarize because he covers everything in such depth and just brilliantly. What else can I say? I learned some stuff here that I had never heard before reading this just a year ago, and I enjoyed it immensely. Now, I will agree with him here on Last and First Men. Here's what he has to say about that. The author himself regarded, or said he regarded, his chronicle as expendable for the next generation. It would certainly raise a smile. While there is no doubt that Stapleton's version of events from 1930 to the present is ludicrous, it is worth close attention if one wishes to savor how wrong prediction can be in both in fact and spirit. Almost anything Stapleton says about Germany and America is incorrect. And I certainly agree with that, and I will have a review of Last and First Men and Odd John shortly, and I'm pretty darn critical of both of those. Here he discusses 1984 and A.E. Van Vogt's The World of Null A. And now I have thought this since 1969. He thinks that Orwell's 1984 may have had quite a bit of inspiration from Van Vogt's World of Null A and General Semantics, especially the Thought Police and Newspeak. Here, let's see if I can read what he says. The Thought Police and the whole psychotic plot of the solitary good guy against the universe is pure Van Vogt, the twist in the tale being that in Orwell's case, the universe represented by Big Brother wins. Perhaps Winston Smith's attempts to unravel the past reflect some past Orwellian attempt to unravel the world of Null A. And of course, both books are about virtually the same thing. So I enjoyed his thoughts on that. And let's see, where's the next page I was on? He covers descriptive writing, which doesn't seem to be valued like it used to be. I really enjoyed descriptive writing, something that you would read and whatever the author wanted you to see, you could see in your mind. As you can see, not many people checked this one out of the library, which is a shame. Well, next are some online sources that I used. John Clute's Encyclopedia of Science Fiction online, very easy to find. Alva Rogers, a little bit grumpy. Requiem For Astounding, I found that on the Internet Archive. And he chronicles everything published in Campbell's Astounding and Analog from about 39 through the late 1950s or about 1960. And he's very critical of Campbell, and I think it was mostly he did not like the name change from Astounding to Analog. But there is a lot of great information in here about what stories appeared in what order and how the fans voted on their favorite stories in the magazine for many years, about 20 years. So that's a worthwhile read as well. Next is an unusual one that I didn't like at first. David Pringle's The Ultimate Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. This is a great book. He does a wonderful job here. Again, his writing is a little in a grumpier style, and that kind of put me off at first. But this guy really put together a worthwhile science fiction book here. Once I reread it, I recognized the value of it, and he has done a lot of great work with this. His introduction is good. He goes through the entire history of science fiction again, and some of these guys have a little different take on who did what and where and when. There's not that much difference between any of them. I know a lot of people think Edgar Allan Poe wrote some science fiction. I was not a big fan of Poe. He was no doubt inventive. He did suffer from syphilis and was crazy, making him very difficult to read. Here we have Wells again. And his astounding stories that Pringle refers to have nothing to do with Astounding magazine. As a matter of fact, in this book you won't even find a section on the golden age of science fiction, which kind of put me off at first. I wasn't sure what was going on. He's clearly writing here about Astounding and Analog. But I'll show you guys why he is a little unhappy with the science fiction magazines here later on in the book. But we won't spend too much time. I'm showing you his greatest strengths here. He goes through television. And he's one of the few people who chronicle science fiction who realizes the Wild Wild West was science fiction, and it is. And the Wild Wild West has a lot in common with Star Trek. Virtually everything Gene Roddenberry did was anti-Nietzschean. Roddenberry did not like Nietzschean philosophy or any philosophy close to it, objectivism, anything like that. Roddenberry is very unhappy with that. Now, the folks who wrote the Wild Wild West, virtually every episode is James West and Artemis Gordon battling a Nietzschean bad guy. And it's very clear if you watch the show. It's virtually every show. Here we have, let's see, what else did I bookmark here? The SF Files. These are the authors. And I think he's got the greatest section on science fiction authors of anything I've seen. And he highlights the folks that he thinks are most important. And of course, you may disagree with the ones that he thinks are most important. I disagree with him on a couple of them. And there is a lot here to contemplate. And you see what these guys look like. It's really a great section in the book, and he covers everyone through 1996. I don't think he leaves any stone unturned. And I really, really enjoyed reading this. A. Bertram Chandler. I think A. Bertram Chandler might have needed a little more space. And Hal Clement as well. I barely have read D.G. Compton. Edmund Cooper might have needed a little more space too. Michael Crichton is a very important author. But Roger Corman, I guess you could consider him important. He did do some film that was worth watching. So we've got a lot here. I can't show you guys everything in here. It would take the rest of our lives. Lester Del Rey should be 3 times this big. There should be 3 times as much information there on Lester. He's certainly far more important than Philip Jose Farmer. So at any rate, we're seeing the idea here. He has a lot covered here. And this is all, let's see if I can find it. All of this is more authors. Here we have A.E. Van Vogt, whom I consider a very important author, even though his prime writing period of time only lasted 10 years. He came up with a tremendous amount of science fiction. Now we're getting to where he discusses the science fiction magazines. Propaganda science fiction magazines. The science fiction magazine is the arena of the new. It keeps talent alive and encourages others to carry the torch. Here we look at the most influential. And he is correct. There is a lot of propaganda in science fiction. And he calls out virtually every single science fiction magazine that ever existed in this section. And we'll have some discussions about that in the future. Highly recommended book. This, I think, is my favorite of the world's science fiction that I have. Now, if you're looking for a history of American science fiction, you cannot do any better than Lester Del Rey, The World of Science Fiction, The History of a Subculture. And Lester Del Rey was there from the beginning. He wrote stories, he published stories, he was an editor and an editor of magazines and an editor at Ballantine Books. Again, he goes through the history of science fiction. And now this is mostly from an American point of view. So if you want to understand American science fiction, this is the one to read. He discusses the Golden Age here. He discusses the length of the Golden Age, which he leaves himself a lot of room. This is a much smaller book and it's kind of difficult to handle. He goes through the survivors of the ages of science fiction, the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s. I believe this one was published in 1979. I'll take a look here again. He discusses every aspect of American science fiction and a lot of global science fiction as well. He is very critical of some authors who seem to be publishing propaganda in the book. So again, for American science fiction, this is great. Now, I didn't just use science fiction encyclopedias and references for my papers. There is a tremendous amount of science fiction history in the anthologies and collections. The editors write, the editors expound on the stories, they give their opinions. One of the greatest resources for this is Asimov's Presents the Greatest SF Stories. And I have them through number 8, I believe. I should get the rest of them. This is through 1946. And this is great stuff. This is great stuff. At the beginning of each book, Asimov gives you the history of the world and the history of science fiction. What's going on in the world at the time. A lot of World War II is included in these. And what is going on in science fiction at the time. I have some other references that I really enjoyed too. I took a science fiction class in college in 1977. This is one of the books. We had 2 books. This one is by Harry Harrison, and I believe it was published in 1973. And here are the incredibly great stories that instructor included for us to read. Just great stuff. At the end of each chapter, we have a section, something for you guys, something for readers to think about, something, this is actually Light of Other Days. What does Bob Shaw mean when he writes, he seemed to know immediately that our uncomprehending fingers had rummaged through his soul? They also define new words you might not have seen at the end of each chapter. Another great resource, and I've kept it all these years. The other book we had for that class was this one. Edited by, I don't even recall Heintz's name, Bonnie Heintz, Frank Herbert, Donald A. Hughes, and Jane Agorn McGee. This one, I believe, was published in 1975, 1974, I was close. And again, an incredible array of science fiction short stories in this book. And I'll let you guys take a look at that. We have just fantastic science fiction in this anthology. So this was another resource that I used. I read what the editors thought about things and that. And now this is not my good copy of Adventures in Time and Space, but this is the copy of Adventures in Time and Space that I had, I guess from about 19 or 20 years of age on. And this is not the one with both introductions. You have to get a later publication than this one to have both introductions. But again, an array of short stories that are nearly impossible to beat. And what the editors have to say is always interesting, and this book is well worth your time. We have a little discussion of each story at the beginning of each one. So another huge resource that I have is I have over 120 science fiction magazines dating back to 1939. This one is from 1964, and this is an analog. In here are the different departments that they have. You can read the Analytical Laboratory and the Reference Library by P. Schuyler Miller. And each one of these things will give you an insight into the science fiction of the time. Here's the Reference Library. It was at this time, in 1964, that Dr. Strangelove, what else? There was so many movies that came out at that time. You had Failsafe, and let's see. There was another one. Failsafe, Dr. Strangelove, and I'll think of it here in a minute. 7 Days in May. So again, these were all very serious movies about the atomic bomb. Dr. Strangelove is played off as a joke, but it's actually very serious. So you can learn a lot from that, and the fan letters. The next one that I will use, and I'm almost done, is This Worlds of If from September 1968. Not only does it contain great science fiction, Bulge is great, Flesh and the Iron is great, like Banco's Ghost is great. There's a lot of stuff in here. We have an interesting editorial by Frederick Pohl. This is back when it was edited by Frederick Pohl and Lester Del Rey. And if you go back to the letters to the editor, there are some very high-powered conversations here. And I read these when I was 14 years old, and it gave me a lot to think about. And I have a whole lot of Worlds of If. I have about 10 years worth of Worlds of If. And another great resource. And the magazines, the ones that were able to reform after the disastrous early 1970s, and most of them just kind of disappeared. Asimov's came back, which inspired some of the older magazines to try to make a comeback. This is amazing from, I believe it is March 1982, being edited by Robert Silverberg, I believe. We have his opinion. They have an interview with A.E. Van Vogt. There he is. And we have some pretty good stories in here, a reprint of A.E. Van Vogt. But the main thing to read in this one is Silverberg's opinion on where science fiction is going. You're going to have giant, long, massive novels, and you're going to have serials. And he was right. So here's A.E. Van Vogt speaking about his writing style. Just great stuff. A lot to research and look at. Fortunately, I grew up during this period of time and read all of it in real time. And I hope everybody is having a good day, and we'll take a look at some of these books. I think you would enjoy them and really get something out of them. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.